And welcome back to another episode of the MatStats Show, the Moneyball of Wrestling, brought to you by the National Wrestling Coaches Association. Episode 25, joined by Kevin Hazard and Glenn Gormley, our resident Grand Poobah and statistician. Before we get going, Kevin, this is one that's going to be close to you. I got a postcard in the mail. This is about Brian. Congratulations on, tangentially on his induction upcoming into the first class of the George Mason Wrestling Hall of Fame. And with that also, the executive director of the NWCA, Mike Moyer, also in that class. So we all have reason to celebrate what's going on at George Mason on October 29th. So, Kevin, since you've got the direct access to the bloodline of one of the inductees, it's pretty cool.
Very cool. And Brian being inducted, it's a pretty stellar class. You've got Mike Moyer, the executive director. You've got a bunch of All-Americans and then a couple of really successful coaches. So Brian really feels honored to be in that first class.
Yeah, it's great news.
And absolutely. And something that I was going to surprise Brian and fly out there, but he's got to work that day. So it's like, here's the thing. Announcers are going to announce. So he does a lot of road races as well. And I've talked a lot about my foray into college hockey, but even before I was, known primarily in wrestling, I did 8 sports in high school. I did 14 sports. Brian does a ton of sports at Robinson. As one of my friends from college whose kids go to Robinson, the voice of Robinson athletics is Brian Hazard, as well as a proud Mason alum, which normally I wouldn't give that much credit to that school in Fairfax, but you know what? They've got a sport and they're still keeping that sport. So I love that part of it. But moving on today, there's something happening here, and it's not just the George Mason thing. And as we were talking before the show, Buffalo Springfield, for what it's worth, Glenn, this is, people of my era that were born after Vietnam ended. It's like, this is like when you watch movies like Forrest Gump and such, or anything that's got the Vietnam theme to it. This is like the song that's in every soundtrack. It's like, it's something happening here. It's like, you know it when you hear it. You may not know who the artist is, but this is a song I think that resonates with everybody.
Yeah, this was the patriarch of We Marry Wrestling, Kevin Hazard's idea to name the show this. And as soon as he said it, I loved it. So, to get moving with the show, guys, there is something happening here. This show, episode 25 of MatStats, is a state of the union of collegiate wrestling. And I'm proud to say it is statistically strong, the state of collegiate wrestling right now. The next slide, of course, is I Feel Like a Number, the old Bob Seger song. And then we added the most famous phone number in history, 867-5309. I mean, because every time I hear that song, I think numbers. So we're adding that. And of course, I have to say, guys, on the start of every show, the opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect that of the NWCA, and not necessarily do Hazard, Bryant, and Gormley agree with each other in all these things.
Never. You stink. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And Gormley does do most of the writing for the show, so sometimes I'll just put in MatStats, and Hazard and Brian are there like, no, I never said that. So a lot of times it's just me. Okay, now.
I do want to jump in with one thing real quick, because as someone who grew up with an 868 phone number when I moved to Pocosin in 1992, don't think I didn't try to call 867-5309 because it was a York County extension. However, it was out of service for the longest time. But if you're in Hampton Roads in the 757 area code and you dial 757-867-5309, you're going to get Danny's Auto Glass. Seriously, you're going to get, and it's all over the place. So when that thing opened up, brilliant marketing on Danny's Glass.
Yeah, he probably got a lot of calls in those days. Okay, so if you see the next slide, thank you, Jason. The famous announcer Dan Patrick always used to say, "Dare I say, in fuego," and that is how I feel right now about collegiate wrestling in America. We are in the Camelot days, okay, which is great news. Now, let's just start right in here with some numbers. That's what this show is. It's a MatStats show. I'm a statistician. I love talking about numbers. Just for everyone's reminder, the NCWA merged with women in 1981-82, and that's when they started keeping hard, comprehensive numbers. Okay, that was the peak of wrestling numbers from 82 till current, with 363. Now we have 283 men's teams. Okay. That is the most men's teams we've had at any time since 1989. Okay. Guys, that is great news to hear. Okay. Because I too often hear people thinking that we're not growing a growing sport, and we are. When we go to slide number 7, this is a snapshot of where we all stand. Division 1, 2, NCAA 3, Division, all the NCAA total, NAIA, and all that total. Okay. The stuff highlighted in red means currently as of 10/5/23, October 5th of this year. Anything highlighted in red is the maximum ever. Okay. Of course, all the women's numbers are the most ever. On the men's side of things, NCAA Division II has more men's teams now than ever. Okay. And if you add women into that, they have more combined teams in both D2, D3, and NCAA total. Okay. We now have 358 NCAA and NAIA men's teams. Jason and I, about a year ago, dove back into. Jason was looking through the old amateur wrestling newses, and we were trying to figure out what schools were NAIA and NCAA combined. It's a long process. The number we believe we found was 418 was the most then. Okay. We now have 499 when you count women, but 358 just with the men, to put you in perspective of where we are. Now, how many four-year colleges, I'm just talking about four-year colleges now on this, have added since 2000? Okay. As of October 5th of this year, 326 new schools were added. Some came from other divisions, totaling 336. Okay. In case you were wondering whether they're brand new schools that didn't have teams or past schools that added, it's more than a 6-time multiplier of brand new schools compared to past teams. And we'll get back to that later in the show. There's the reason I brought it up. Now, who is adding these teams, men and women? Because so often, especially in the William Mary Suite, supposedly a very educated suite, I have not done a good enough job educating that suite. Kevin and I have failed miserably on educating the suite. What's going on there? Okay, if you look at slide number 9 here, 336 have totally added. Men are 166, women are 170. Almost everyone you talk to think it's all women added. And the women have only surpassed the men in a 5-year period starting in 2020. Okay, before then, the men's growth had outpaced the women, which is hard to believe. And that's why we need to do stats. Okay, now.
And Glenn, one thing, I talked to Mike the other day, and we were looking just in the school year. So looking from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. So that, some people, the school year, the fiscal year, whatever, the July to June kind of that calendar, I think it was 59 new schools or new teams in just that year. And yeah, the vast majority were women's programs. But again, we saw almost 60 new programs added in just one school year or one fiscal year. So, and again, the women have grown just huge the last 3 years, especially.
Mm-hmm. And it is staggering, people, to think. And the men are caught up in this wave. Rising tide lifts all boats. So the next logical thing is, okay, how many schools have dropped since 2000? Okay, the answer to your question is, sadly, the number is 67, plus 16 colleges have closed. So you really can't fault the AD or the wrestling coach if the college closes, right? Okay, so what is the net number on this? Because that's what the world's all about here. It's all about nets, especially, a stats guy. Net from 2000 till October 5th, we are up 269 teams. Okay, now, when you look at the first 5-year increment there, 2000 to 2004, we were down 2 schools. So the growth has all come recently. And of course, like we talked about in past shows, it's not coincidentally when women's wrestling became protocol here that the men have added too. From 2020 to 2023, which isn't quite a 5-year period yet, the net total is 140 new schools. I mean, it's great news, guys. Okay. The next slide just shows a breakdown. It's 164 new total women's net and 105 men for the 269. Okay. So we're seeing that it's happening across it. Now, where does the men's NCAA growth look since 2010? We are the third highest growth rate of the top 14 men's schools. So, guys, that's good news. We were used to being the only sport that was losing teams. Now we're the third highest growth rate. So that's all good news. The two schools that are above us in growth rate are men's lacrosse and men's volleyball. And both of those are traditionally more schools in the NCAA, as the next slide 14 shows you. So they rode that wave of women success. And that's the wave we're riding now. Now, one thing I really want to stress here. I said earlier in the show that we're the most schools since 1989. If you look at the participants in men only, NCAA, and they have not released figures for 2023 yet. So this is for the 2022 season. We are fourth.
Yeah, they usually come out in October,
Correct.
so we should be seeing those participation numbers fairly soon. And the NCAA does a fantastic job with their research and history on this stuff.
Oh, my God. I'm blown away by the job the NCAA does. So we are now fourth, guys, and only 234 wrestlers short of the all-time best since 1981-82. Okay, that's how well this is doing. And I don't know what the numbers are yet, but I will relay them to you when we get those numbers from the NCAA. I don't want to speculate. Okay, with me saying I don't want to speculate, okay, I'm going to go back to the speculation I made on a previous show on March 16, 2022, episode 7, Is This Heaven? No, It's Camelot. I said live here that by 2025, we were going to have more men's wrestlers than ever. And we might do that we might already have done it. We might have done it by March of 2024, but we'll definitely have it by 2025. So I'm going to say, as the famous late Stuart Scott used to say, booyah, if we get there.
Yeah, I love it when you throw in the NFL primetime and the Sports Center references. And one thing I also want to adjust, because not adjust, but bring up as a discussion point between us is we look at that, and of course we see the Division I numbers. They're not growing as we'd like. Now we're seeing new programs from the transitional. We're seeing the California Baptist reclassify. We're seeing Queens and Lindenwood and Bellarmine in their classification or reclassification period. We're seeing LIU having merged their Brooklyn campus and their Long Island, their actual true Long Island campus out in Brookville near Hofstra into one athletics program. So we're seeing growth. Morgan State released their first schedule in 27 years or something like that, 26 years this week. So we're seeing ads from schools reclassifying. But here's what people always want to see. What about Alabama? What about Texas? Like, what about Division I? Because that's where the majority of our sports fan base lives in the Big Ten. They live in the Northeast. They care about when's the next Power 5 school. Well, if you've paid attention to the world of NIL and realignment and all the chaos that started, it's not going to be Power 5, folks. I don't think we're going to see a Power 5 program start wrestling unless somebody shows up like the guy at Penn State did with ice hockey, and he got a pound sand number, and he goes, okay, and next thing you know, Penn State has hockey. The Big Ten now sponsors the sports. It's going to take somebody that's, we have some philanthropic people in this sport, but it's going to take somebody dropping a big check at a P5 school, or now P4, because we don't know what the Pac-2 is going to do. That's an interesting side note, too. So I think we need to just get past the Power 5. Power 5 schools are not going to throw money away if they don't have to. They're at the minimum men's sports, most of them. They're not going to say, oh, well, you could afford it. Absolutely, you could afford it. Now they've got all this money they got to throw back at football for NIL, allegedly. So we need to get past the whole, P5s. No, we need to celebrate the schools moving from D2 to D1. We need to celebrate the Utah Valley that started from scratch as a junior college and waited 7 years to be D1 eligible. We need to celebrate the North Dakota states, the South Dakota states that reclassify, 15, 20 years ago as Division II powerhouses. So those are the schools we look. We need to target the Little Rocks, the schools that don't have football that are Division I, to grow the sport at that level. We can't just poo-poo the D2, D3 NAIA ads and then only want the Oregons back or Washington back or the Big Ten schools. You need to sponsor wrestling. Great. Guess what? We need to stop playing the victim here. We need to celebrate what we have versus complain about what we don't have. There's my soapbox moment of the additions piece, because I love the ads too, but people are, well, it's not Division I. Yeah, guess what? Your kids that are your coaches typically aren't wrestling Division I. And soapbox.
Okay, then I'm going to say right there for Stuart Scott, booyah.
All right, here we go.
Thank you very much,
Double
Kevin.
booyahs.
And the next slide here, slide 18. Okay. Well, we showed this on our earlier show, episode 18 on February 15th, 2023, RESPECT, where we explained, and you see it on slide 18, the participation rate with number of teams and the participants. Now, Kevin, take it over and explain this slide to people, because you actually wrestled in 71.
I did, and I was going to say something right here, because you see, and I think these are kind of it's not perfectly correct, but as good an analysis that we can do. But my senior year was 1971, and so I was wrestling at the peak. Did not know it at the time, at the peak of college wrestling as far as participants go. And it's
also the peak of your hairline, if I
well,
if I'm
no,
told.
like I started losing my hair 10 years before that. I had a widow's peak at 14, so it was never in the cards for me to have a lot of hair. But it was interesting, and went up and up and up, and then it started slowly going down, and then it kind of went on a rampage going down. And now we're coming back up, and it feels so good, and we're gonna hit that number, and it's gonna be in the next couple of years, I think.
Yeah, and guys, just so you know these numbers, thank you for explaining that, Kevin. This is in the NCAA sports sponsorship report that, as Jason said earlier, is coming out in a couple of weeks here, the updated one. These are 5-year increments they do it on, and we don't know how many of these teams were rec teams. They just say they might be some rec teams, but we don't know how many. So if you ever hear someone say that back in my day, if you ever hear a number bigger than 393, they're either drunk, confused, or both, okay? Because it's not the truth, okay? Next. Does women's wrestling hurt men's wrestling? I have been on my soapbox saying women's wrestling has helped it so much since the advent of it. Okay, but I need to repeat that all the time to people. As Lee Corso always says on Saturdays, not so fast, my friend, when people say it might hurt it. Okay, we know now that we were the only, we said this in episode 3 on November 21. That was back in the early days. It was actually the first episode that we were lucky enough to get Jason Bryant on the show with us. Wrestling was the only sport, men's that had a decrease in the men's amount of teams. Okay, so that's when I did that research, first started thinking Title IX wasn't the answer, was that we didn't have women. And now that we have women, we're changing. Okay, now, here's where I'm going to make a shift on this show. We usually concentrate mainly on NCAA and NAIA because that's where most of the notoriety is. And like Jason said earlier, it's usually Power 5 NCAA schools to get all the attention. Kevin Hazard was the first one when that school in Williamsburg started talking about dropping the team and then later dropped it, shortly after that, Jim Junta started the National Collegiate Wrestling Association. He started that in 98. Kevin Hauser was the first one at William and Mary to beat that drum. And I was his first ally on that. Okay. This goes to what Jason just said earlier about we have to break away from just worrying about Bama and the SEC, et cetera, Notre Dame, et cetera. There are now 229 programs in the NCWA. 183 of these are unique American schools because some of the schools like we are, Penn State and the Ohio State, have both an NCAA team and an NCWA team. So you add to the number we were giving you earlier, 499, that you add 183 to that. Okay, that's 682. That is by far more than there were in the glory days when Kevin Hausen, shortly after that, when I was wrestling. Okay, now here's a very
You love bringing up the fact Kevin's older than you.
Yes, he is. Yes.
I'm older than most.
I graduated in 84, so Kevin's 13 years older than me, if anybody was wondering. And I do have hair. I just choose not to grow it. Okay.
Put the hat back on.
Yeah. It's all white, my hair, but I have hair. So, with the Power 5.
We won't go there.
With the Power 5 thing we're talking about, this slide here on slide 22, on episode 22 slide, shows the NCWA has 28 men's teams. The NCWA, Jim Gunter's situation, has 33. Okay, with women, the NCAA has 1. Jim Junta's NCWA has 13. That means Jim Junta has 1.55 times the amount of Power 5 schools as the NCWA. Okay? Now, we mentioned earlier, some of those also have NCAA. So if you look at the uniqueness of it, it's 28 NCAA and 25 Guntas. That's close to 50-50, guys. It's 53-47. So this organization is really growing. Okay. Let me sum up some stuff here where I said the statistical state of collegiate wrestling is strong. What we've learned here is as of October 5th, there's 499 NCAA and NAIA teams. Okay. That's 682 if you count NCWA. Okay. There are more NCAA teams at any point since 89. There are more D2 teams than ever. Okay. We rank 4th with participation rate. Okay. This is really something special going on. Okay. Now, slide 25. The way I broke this down was I'm talking about schools with NCAA or NAIA teams here. There's 4 categories. Colleges with 2 teams, colleges 1 team, colleges with 0 teams, but might be able to start a team. Colleges with 0 teams, but have little to no chance to start a team. You know what, guys? Welcome to the 2 schools I wrestled at and the school Kevin wrestled at, and most likely, sadly, the school where Jason went to also. Okay. So,
yeah, I didn't wrestle there. Now, granted, I was beaten on by wrestlers quite a bit because they were my roommates. So I had about as close to the college wrestling experience without actually wrestling a match that I think you can get.
Yeah, but you're an alma mater. That's your alma mater. You're an alum of the school. Okay, now, let's see here. Of the current 358 men's teams in the NCAA and NAIA, okay, 141 of them, okay, also have women's teams. That means 39, you see on slide 27, 39% of all the teams of the men's team also have a women. That's great to see, guys. And you can see what's holding that back. The NCAA, it's only 5%. Now, you might ask, why are there only 77 schools there in men's D1 when there's really 81? Because we put the schools that are normally in D2 or D3 in their levels here because that's where they are for women. So we didn't want to do apples and oranges. Okay. Next. Okay. So 62% have one team, 38% have two teams. We just saw there. The next slide with numbers on it. Okay. People were worrying that it could be a problem that schools will just have women's wrestling and not have men, which we saw earlier with lacrosse and volleyball. It's a realistic concern, but that has not happened. Okay. There's 141 women's teams in the NCAA and NAIA. 6 of them have women's only teams. However, some of these are all women's schools that can't have men's teams. And one school, Northern Michigan, has a women's team, doesn't have a men's NCAA team, but has a men's Greco team. So overall,
yeah, and there are outliers here, Glenn, too. Like William Jewell just dropped men's wrestling. They're going to keep their women's program. There's some issues around practice space and whatnot, and what the women's coach will be able to do for the men's coach, men's athletes that stuck around. I think they're all in the portal, but there are anomalies that do exist. Of course, I think that's more the outlier than the rule. Of course, William Jewell is in that boat right now. They're Division II. Southwestern, which had a women's program for a very short time, they hired a coach. They had a season of opens, but I don't think that they never wrestled a dual meet, and they were in Kansas. They kind of went dormant. I don't believe they've actually dropped the program. It's just kind of dormant, meaning it's we had a team. We don't know if we're ever bringing it back, but we didn't actually officially axe the thing. So again, there's going to be that every now and then based on budgets and things of that nature. So not saying it's impossible, but we've got Northern and we got William Jewell that subscribe to this type of format right now.
But
Jewell does still have a men's program this year, which they're putting on air quotes pause, which means they're going to cut it. Their vice president for athletics wouldn't answer the yes or no question when I inquired if they were going to drop the team. They would say, "Oh, we'll wait Friday," but that's another issue entirely. But yeah, so that's where we have Northern is primarily the example to use here.
But I think that's probably the most telling statistic for this whole program, this month's program. 1% of schools with only a women's team, and we heard that time and time again. It's going to ruin men's wrestling if you allow women. It's not the case. It's not the case. Jason's right. If it's an outlier, if there is a bad situation, I think it's
or only, unique, like
only brought more men's.
Yeah, Northern is so unique because that's the only non-Army WCAP Greco specific program outside of the training center, and then 20 miles down the road in Fort Carson, if it even is that far, with Army WCAP. So it's the only Greco outpost outside of Colorado in some specific things like some RTCs that Dennis Hall's got one and such like that. But they were women USOEC women's freestyle and Greco for the longest time until basically the developmental program shifted to Colorado Springs. So in lieu of that, they've got some familiar faces running that program on the NCAA, the soon-to-be NCAA side, the NCAA school side of things on the women's program. And again, they still have the Greco, the U.S. Olympic Training Site is what it's now called. So they have, partner programs. They just one's not an NCAA, as Glenn pointed out.
Okay, thank you, guys. Now, there's so many factors going to schools adding a team. Okay, there's a lot of moving parts, and there's no 100% firm rules, as Jason just touched on there. Okay, we're just trying to identify some trends and tendencies here, guys, with the numbers, because this is a stat show. Okay, since 2000, the schools have added men's wrestling since 2000. 84% are private schools. Okay, that's six. I was supposed to say 86. So I made a mistake there. That's 6 times the amount of private schools over public schools. Okay, and you can see, of course, the addition is coming at Division II, Division III, and NAIA. All right. Now, the next slide, it shows how much of the growth of private over public is in Division II, III, and NAIA. Okay, and that's just the way it's going right now, guys. The growth is private schools and Division two, three, and NAIA. And as Jason said on his soapbox, if you get to do it, wrestle, you get to wrestle. Doesn't really matter where you are. Now, what advice can I give people that I'm trying to get them to understand the strength of the sport right now and get out of this your mindset of the 80s? Well, when the patriarch of William Mary Wrestling, Kevin Hazard, was actually wrestling then, okay, a famous song came out where the words were, "Oh no, William and Mary won't do." Okay. I did not think the girl could be so cruel, and I'm never going back to my old school. The famous Steely Dan song. You can see it on the next slide. Okay. What happened with the William Mary?
Wait, Steely Dan referenced William and Mary?
Oh,
Yes.
no. Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
Ugh.
And what's funny about
I'm
that, Jason?
I'm not a Steely Dan guy, so you've lost me on this one.
Well, for years, we all thought that this song really was about William and Mary. But when I was a student there, they broke the story on the radio station, Kevin, and it said it's just words that rhyme with it. He didn't go to William and Mary. It has nothing to do with William and Mary. Okay. But what the problem was is it took me some years, the old, the wisdom to know the difference. God grant me the serenity prayer is you have to know the wisdom to know the difference between who can out of school and who can't out of school. Okay. And I was the one that led William and Mary alumni on a bad path and didn't listen to Kevin soon enough, et cetera. And look at it and say, we need women's wrestling, all that stuff. Sometimes it takes brain surgery to know the difference. Okay. So there's several other factors that are floating around out there too. I have a funny story too for you. I can't forget this about the Steely Dan thing. The main guy in Steely Dan, of course, is Fagan. His last name Fagan. We had, I'm sure you know him, Kevin, Sandy Fagan, buddy of mine, who was a student then. And he went around telling people Donald Fagan was his brother, okay, to impress women. He had no relation to him. Okay. So there's other things going on that we touched on. Conference realignment, NIL. There's really nothing that statistically we can say about NIL now. But I will get into the conference realignment so quickly because it is something that is touching everything. On slide 37, you can see there's only 4 schools that have wrestling teams that were involved in the realignment. Stanford went to the ACC, Arizona State Big 12, Oklahoma SEC, and Oregon State is left in the Pac-2. Okay. How that turns out, who knows? Slide 38. This is an interesting thing. And by the way, good luck at Stanford to the Ayers family. We wish you well. You're great time. And good luck to Joey Dubuque taking over at Princeton. Fans of all you guys. The closest school in mileage to Stanford that has wrestling in the ACC is Pitt at 2,257 miles. We need somebody to strike an NIL deal for Stanford to travel. Okay. So that's the kind of things that could rear its ugly head in smaller sports. Okay. Of the 6 men's D1 teams that have been reinstated since 2000, only Arizona State is a Power 5 school. So those aren't schools that are re-adding. Okay. None of the 4 new men's Power 5 teams are for Power 5 conferences. Utah Valley, Cal Bat, Presbyterian, Little Rock. Okay. Now, here's just my editorial thing. Turn back the clock on conference realignment. Jason Bryan did a show here, one of the episodes. I forget the number, where he proposed different conferences, and they were smaller. And I loved what he was saying, because what do Rutgers and UCLA have in common? Unless UCLA means University of Central Jersey, like almost. I mean, I have no idea what.
That's good. That's good. I like that. I like that. Now, and also, we did the MatStats on the renovation of college wrestling last summer, and then I did an update to it on Short Time. which you can find at mattalkonline.com, where I went and actually probably needs an update again because this was prior to Stanford. And, it was like, what happens if Stanford goes here? How can we do this? And, of course, I'm still beating the drum of the Mountain Pacific Sports Federation, which if you looked at the bid cycles and how much the bids of the teams that would have been in that conference, it would have been like the third. It would have been right there with the EIWA in terms of number of bids. So we need to get away from the logo that's on the back of the singlet as being a draw because, again, that reputation is based on football. It's not based on wrestling. That's another soapbox. You can go back and listen to that. Again, things have been tweaked since then. Since the renovation thing, Campbell went to the CAA, and then we had the whole Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA to the Big Ten. So a couple things have been tweaked since there, but I think the vast majority of the meat and potatoes of the most recent update on short time is available. That was back in August is when I put that out. So just a little programming note for you.
Yep, and like we said earlier, try not to get in a caste system like CASTE, where Division I men is the only thing that matters. All right.
Well, college sports is entirely a caste system, but again, that's another drum. That's another soapbox we don't have time for.
No, we don't have time for it. Yeah. Okay. Now, guys, control what we can. Okay. And I reference a lot of ESPN stuff and old shows, which weren't old shows when me and Kevin were young. But basically, what you see on slide 44 is William & Mary was looking for a genie in a bottle. Okay. And we never found that genie. Okay. And maybe we were looking on the wrong beach because what happened was the NCWA was formed shortly after that school in Williamsburg dropped. Okay. It is like a AAA baseball league, the NCAA. People transition like from NAIA to NCAA. They might have to go to the Jim Junta's NCWA all the time. Or they might go from D2 to D3 and have to transition on there. Or they might start there. Okay. So it is a really wild thing. How seriously is Gormley taking this NCAA? I called Jim earlier this last week and I let him know I'm going to go to the NCWA Nationals in Shreveport, Boozer City. It's the week before the men's D1s. I want to go and see this and support it. We all say we support things, but I need to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to go there and see it. Okay, and I'll be happy to report back to you guys, to everyone at the suite, what it looks like. Now, here are some numbers, and then I'm going to let Kevin take over because Kevin has been the biggest proponent of the Jim Junta's NCAA. 37 men's teams.
Sorry, listeners might have a little tweak there. NCWA. So when you hear Glenn say Jim Junta, he means the NCWA, not the NCAA. We got alphabet soup in this sport. We know it because this show is for the NWCA.
That's why I'm trying to say.
Again, we got alphabet soup everywhere. So if you're following along on I recommend following along on the video or having the PowerPoint presentation and following along. So that will help you in case you're just listening without the visual aids here.
Thank you. I'm trying my best to say Jim Junta's NCWA, so I don't mix it up with NWCA.
You said it there, and it sounds like you're saying NCW. I totally get it.
Yeah, I'm doing the best I can. I got a weird accent too. So 37 men's teams have been used in the Jim Junta's NCWA to transition to NCAA or NAIA. Okay. Some of these schools no longer have programs, or they were in Canada or JUCOs, but there's 25 NCAA or NAIA current members that use gyms to transition. That is 7% of all men's teams came from Jim. Kevin, take it away and tell us some stuff about what Jim Junta has done.
Well, basically, I mean, when he founded it, he saw a need. He just said, we have all of these high school athletes really with no place to go, and he just wanted to develop a league that really anybody could, you could come to the nationals with one guy or one girl, 10 guys, 20 guys. It was just his vision was, we're going to have a nationwide wrestling league that's not caught up with NCAA, NAIA, and just it was just I think you said it. It's like a AAA. Here's a place you can go to college, and you can go to a national championship, and it's gotten to the point where it's just tough. You know, well, like we said, we are going to talk about the one team that's getting ready to go from NCWA to D1. So that's how big he's grown it in that 30 years, 97, 07, 35 years.
Yeah, he's done a great job. And I want to get that across to people on this show that that's part of collegiate wrestling, just like anything else. Okay, now let's have a little fun here on this show before Kevin gives us his Kevin's Matt notes. Okay, it's October, so we're going to use a little bit of fun. October's known for football and, of course, the World Series. So I'm going to give you a little stats and stats analysis fun that you might have seen, you might not have seen. I'm sure many of you guys saw or know of the Ohio State Notre Dame football game recently. Okay, I think it was 2-3 weeks ago. Notre Dame was beating the Ohio State 14-10 with 1 second to go in the game. The Ohio State scores a touchdown. Okay, they barely made it, so the play was reviewed because we review everything in America, and anything of the importance of the Ohio State Notre Dame game, you got to review. So Ryan Day had quite some time to decide whether to go for 1 or 2. As soon as the Ohio State University scored, I was screaming, kneel on it. Kneel on it. Everyone goes to me, why would you kneel on this? Well, with 1 second to go in the game, a field goal is not in play. Either you're returning the ensuing kickoff or you're doing a hook and lateral, but you can no longer run down the field and stop and drop kick it. So the field goal's out of the question. So the only thing that could have happened was that Notre Dame blocks the extra point, returns it the other way for 2, and ties the game going into overtime. Ryan Day, you need a statistician to tell you whether to go for 1, 2, or kneel on it. Okay, too big of a budget to make that big of a mistake. Okay, now another example on stats and how to analyze it. Ole Miss beat LSU 55-49 recently. LSU was leading 49-47 with less than a minute to go. Numbers guys would tell you have a higher percentage of making a short field goal like that than you do scoring a touchdown and you risk fumbling the ball, etc. The coach from Ole Miss, whose name I don't say, okay, had 700 total yards. I see Jason got a laugh out of that. Was real close to having 700 total yards. He went over it on his last play. We opted to throw the ball. Why did that coach not kneel on it and kick a field goal? And I was talking to people. It was between the third and fourth quarters of the Vols game, so I was watching it on TV when I was at the game. In 2008, that coach from Ole Miss was then a Tennessee coach. He opted to kneel on the ball at the end of the game and kick a field goal against Bama. Well, Bama blocked that field goal and we lost. Okay. Now, the difference was that game was 14-12, so we were not moving the ball well, where they were moving at Ole Miss. So I got to give credit to that man from Oxford, okay, for using some numbers. Okay, now, the next thing is a great stat that I've heard a couple times last year and this year. This is mind-boggling to me. The best home field advantage of any stadium in Major League Baseball history is the Philadelphia Phillies Citizens Bank. Next best is Shea Stadium, and then 7th is the Yankees, which is stunning because the Phillies and Mets are known to be bad franchises and the Yankees the best. So those are 3 stats I just throw in there. Now I'm going to let Kevin take away the Kevin's notes. Go ahead, Kevin.
But going through the slides, it was really interesting. And here's some of the most interesting points. 10-5-23. More NCAA men's wrestling since 1989. Number 2, NCAA D2 schools, now more teams than ever. Number 3, 326 four-year schools have been added since 2000. That's a net increase of 269 schools. Women's teams, the new teams have skyrocketed since 2010. And as of 10-5, 499 teams at the 4 years level. 6, men's wrestling has the third highest growth rate of D1 sports in the NCAA since 2010. Number 7, as of 2022, the NCAA has the fourth highest participation numbers since 81-82, so 40 years. We will be number 1 by 2025 or sooner. The NCWA, Jim Gunter, has been a great addition to collegiate wrestling. It has contributed greatly to the NCAA and NAIA growth. Number 9, of all the NCAA and NAIA schools with women's wrestling, and again, I thought this was the most important stat that we brought out today, only 1% only have a women's team at schools that have male students. And 10th, the state of collegiate wrestling is really statistically and just really strong.
Thank you, Kevin. Next month's show is the state of high school wrestling. Okay. It'll inform our viewers the state of high school wrestling. MatStats will dive into where high school wrestling has been, where it is, and where it's headed. Any last words, Kevin or Jason?
I'm looking forward to that show and just in how we do the high school versus the international, because I think that's a really important component of the growth of high school wrestling, the strength of high school wrestling.
Yeah, and I also think it's going to be a good point to bring up, again, like we do with other things, is there's numbers, but there's also almost always a caveat to the numbers. So we look back, and not to spoil the lead for next month's episode, but we've looked at the NFHS stats before, and we've seen that we had over 300,000 wrestlers at one point in the 70s. Well, something to consider: how many sports were being offered at the high school level back then, and potential activities. So I'm curious on number of teams. I'm curious on number of roster sizes and things of that nature, not just the pure numbers behind it, because, participation in every sport ebbs and flows. So I'm curious on what it's going to see at the high school level. And also, I'm digging in on some other stats that I believe I've just completed once I've got Massachusetts today. This is a little tease for what's going to be an upcoming show. Glenn doesn't even know about this yet because I just thought of it. The styles of high school state championships. We've got some states that have duels. We have some states that crown their title with individual tournaments. I put out a graphic the other day that made some friends back in Virginia a little upset. I put out the number of the most state championship teams that came out of Virginia. That included private schools. We're now at 6 public school classes plus a private. Well, one of them was Great Bridge High School with their 28 state championships. 6 of them were during the 7 years that the VHSL did the AAA state dual meet championships. And Grundy, which has 22 state championships, and Taz Robertson, my buddy down there in Southwest Virginia, is like, we didn't have a chance to have those state championships because AA didn't have it. And, of course, they beat 2 of those Great Bridge teams that year, or those years. So, how we count state championships. There's duels, there's divisions. Massachusetts went from a divisional level to an all-state championship. A lot of stuff. I've got every single state done. There's only one division I have left to track down, and that is the Wisconsin private schools that ended in 1999. That is the only division on the boys' side. I'm still digging through all the girls because a lot of the girls' tournaments don't yet have team scores. So that's one thing we're looking forward to. And in that point, Glenn is we're waiting for Glenn to get the final word here. He just pieced out. Here comes Glenn. Here comes Glenn back. So I was saying, Glenn, as you before you left us a little early, is the women's state tournaments don't yet have team scores in a lot of cases, and some of them don't have enough numbers for duels. But at least on the boys' side, we have a lot of data to look at state championships from a duel to an individual standpoint. What's counted? What states like them? What states don't? And things of that nature. So that's something I've been doing since the last episode to keep my mind busy and the procrastination on finishing episode 2 of the Gray Simons podcast.
Great. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for summing it up. And on behalf of my fellow co-hosts, Jason Bryant, Kevin Hazard, I'm Glenn Gormley, and adios from NCWA MatStats.